what we found was for every dollar invested in flood prevention in Miami, that's particularly acute, it showed $13 in avoided losses.
Hi, I'm Louisa Henry, and this is Any Job Can Be a Climate Job. Melissa Fifield leads BMO's Climate Institute and brings over 20 years of experience helping businesses and communities find practical answers to tackle climate challenges. Stay tuned to hear why that $13 number is so important for building buy-in, how Melissa and team found hidden talent across all corners of BMO's organizations to help with climate initiatives, and why the only thing you need to make a difference is curiosity and the skill set you already have. Here's my conversation with Melissa. So, Melissa, you run the BMO Climate Institute. And for folks who don't know what that is, what does it do?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Louisa. I'm really happy to be here. The BMO Climate Institute is really an enterprise function at the bank. So we work across corporate functions. We work across with our lines of business. We really try to sit at the hub and connect the dots between climate science, economic conditions, the realities of how businesses are being impacted by our changing climate. And we try to connect that with real-world decision-making. We try to surface research and insights that help our clients to better understand how those things are impacting them and how to address them pragmatically. What are some of the solutions or some of the things they might be thinking about to help mitigate or adapt to our changing climate in ways that are that help them be successful in their businesses?
And you work through relationship managers for yourself, right? Not necessarily directly with customers.
Correct. We are really an enablement function at the bank. And so we work sort of behind the scenes in some ways to help those who are on the front lines working with clients better, like I said, translate what's happening, big picture,
Yeah.
to pragmatically how this might impact a client more directly. And so we do that really in three ways. I would say foundationally, part of the Climate Institute's mandate is management of our own operational emissions. So,
Mm-hmm.
what are the greenhouse gas emissions coming from our physical locations, our branches, our office buildings, anywhere where we have a physical footprint? So we work really closely with our corporate real estate teams and those engineering teams who are making decisions about HVAC and all of the things that contribute toward energy consumption. And then that's sort of foundational. That's how are we walking the talk?
Right.
On
So
that
internally.
foundation are exactly. On that foundation are two additional things. One is how are we helping to build awareness, education, empowerment amongst our bank colleagues? So, as you mentioned, working with relationship managers who are engaging with clients one-on-one every day. How do we arm them with education, tools, awareness, conversation starters for how they can sort of make this real and bring it to life in their client conversations?
Okay.
So that's one piece in terms of engaging with the rest of the enterprise. And then on top of that, we are also, as I mentioned, developing research, doing analysis, publishing insights around how some of these number one, again, back to how are some of these trends manifesting in business realities day to day, but then also how can we amplify solutionists? How are we amplifying the work of others to really show what's possible? Because I think that's fundamentally how you get people engaged is by showing what's possible.
Yeah.
I don't think that we can inspire people necessarily with the worst case scenario. I think that it really comes down to showing the way, highlighting best practices, highlighting cool innovations that maybe people can think of that might apply in their work or for their company, and amplifying those experts and the work that's happening, maybe beyond the bank, maybe even beyond our own clients. That's a really cool platform that I'm excited that the Climate Institute continues to advance. And we do that through the Climate Institute website, but then also we have a podcast called Sustainability Leaders where we try to amplify those voices as well.
Yeah, that's great. We'll definitely link to both of to that and the report that you just mentioned. And I definitely want to get into some of those innovative solutions that you were talking about. We'll jump into that a bit later. But you just surveyed a bunch of business leaders, and that report came out. What did you find most surprising in that report?
I think I think generally what's maybe not surprising, but always interesting to me is that sustainability and climate action, there's a lot of energy around and a lot of conversation around, is this work dead? Or is it
Hmm.
so stymied that we're not making progress? And I think what
Right.
was most interesting to me, this is the fourth time that we've done this business leaders survey. So over the past 4 years, we've seen consistent trend lines. So I guess what I maybe might have hypothesized we would have seen would be a dip in either commitment or action, or companies saying that they are developing plans or not developing plans, as the case may be. But what
Yeah.
we've actually seen over those 4 years is that more companies have or are developing plans. It's at 73% across North America right now. And of those, 91% of the companies that have or are developing climate action plans are confident that those actions are actually improving business outcomes.
Hmm.
What I love about these results is that it really shows that it's no longer about maybe setting climate or sustainability targets for the sake of the targets,
Yeah.
but it's that business leaders are showing that by putting these plans in place, by thinking about how climate is integrated into their business operations,
Hmm.
they're helping to build resilience, they're building competitiveness, and they're showing that it's improving their performance. So I think that was really encouraging, especially in this moment where there's just a lot of conversation about, how committed are companies to maybe these targets or to taking action in general.
Yeah. So maybe everything we read in the news isn't quite accurate when you peel back the
Yeah, I
layers.
think it was exactly. I think it's really validating to see that, underneath the headlines, there's actually a lot of really incredible work happening. And business leaders are taking it seriously. And not just taking it seriously, but also integrating it with their business planning. It's not a separate or siloed consideration. It is part
Right.
of a well run, um, you know, competitive, well performing company.
Yeah, yeah, I like what you said there, and I think that's really important that it's impacting business outcomes. So not only impacting their, hitting or moving towards their climate goals, but it's helping the business drivers as well. So whatever they're trying to achieve as a company, that's
Yeah,
that's the best way
exactly.
to do it. Hmm.
Exactly.
And so what's the action that's actually being done on the ground?
In terms of actions that companies are taking?
Yeah, yeah. One of the numbers I read in that report was that 38% are factoring environmental impact into financial decisions, up from
Mm.
25% in 2023. And so I'm wondering what action is driving that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And this is something, we have the survey results at a high level, and we don't unfortunately get a chance to interview the respondents directly to sort of unpack those top line findings. But one of the things that the Climate Institute does do is an analysis of um, sort of the economic impact of some of these actions. And so maybe I'll just
Okay.
share a couple of examples of how we've tried to unpack what those business benefits are of investments in resilience, for example. So we did some research with an organization called Climate First Building Solutions, as well as the Investment Management Corporation of Ontario. And we looked at physical risk resilience in multi unit residential buildings, so
Hmm.
large apartment complexes in major metropolitan cities. So we looked at New York, LA, San Francisco, Houston, Phoenix, Miami, Washington, D.C., and Chicago. And we tried
Okay.
to look at what are the key climate risks that these locations are facing specifically. So we looked at heat, precipitation, flood, wind, wildfire, drought, like what is most common in those specific geographic areas.
Yeah.
Um, And what we found in looking at what is the anticipated economic impact of those risks, we then looked at what are the types of investments that could be made to mitigate against those risks. And what we found was for every dollar invested in, for example, flood prevention in Miami, that's particularly acute, it showed $13 in avoided losses. So a multi-unit residential building has a very long lifespan, right? And so
Yeah.
not only did we show that the investments actually pay off over the course of that lifespan, there's a number of ancillary benefits beyond just the dollars saved. It makes it a more attractive place to live for tenants.
Right.
It reduces insurance and maintenance and repair costs. So there's a whole bunch of other benefits there.
Yeah, I can imagine. And that's great that you're diving into that layer. I'm curious, what is it like? What are some of these things that are being done for flood prevention, for example?
Yeah, I mean, like physical flood barriers, for example. I
Mm,
mean, window films, window sealants around, for heat,
yeah.
for flood. It's those physical barriers. It's also things like relocating equipment. Like, let's
Mm,
not put the highly technical equipment for building operations like on a sub water level floor in the building. Like, let's move those things. And it
yeah.
actually shows the benefit of doing that. It's also leak detection systems. I mean, some of these things are not super sophisticated, but it's about being thoughtful and about prioritizing where it makes the most sense to do those actions and where the juice is most worth the squeeze.
As part of your job in this role, you're kind of diving into these cities that are maybe the major U.S. or North American cities,
Hmm.
identifying what their most probable or common
Hmm.
impacts of climate change, and then identifying what are the investments that could be made, and how does that return money not only to them and to the happiness of their customers and tenants and the longevity of their buildings and less maintenance and all of that, but I imagine also to your company, BMO, as the financing institution for these customers. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't look at specific BMO clients. We took some
Okay.
proxy data, just to sort of anonymize it, and in partnership with our research partners. But the Climate Institute has a team of folks. We have folks who are um, public policy experts, climate economists. We try to leverage all of those points of expertise, and then find partners that also have access to data that we can combine with, trends we're seeing or models that we can create to help forecast what some of the impacts of those investments might be.
Okay. Okay. And so do you have relationship managers that come to you like after a storm hits Miami or a specific region and something happens to a customer's building or warehouse or something like that, and like what is that story, and like is it repeating, or like give us a little sense of what hits your desk?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say it's not as acute as the example that you shared, but we are certainly talking to relationship managers about, and what's most exciting to me is where we're seeing opportunities. So it could be things like um, tax equity opportunities for making some of these investments, and in fact, that's an example of a project that the Climate Institute did, was developing a tool to highlight state, federal, provincial policy incentives that could incentivize the types of, the adoption of the types of solutions that we want to see. For example, if you're a company that has a large fleet of vehicles and you want to electrify that fleet of vehicles,
Right.
we wanted to be able to help unlock, where are there incentives to help you do that from the government, and then how can we augment that with products and services that the bank offers.
Oh, that's cool. So have there been examples of, because I was curious about that too. Like where's the tipping point or the line where climate goes from being like something that the bank is studying to where it's something that's, a new product offering or a service that you offer your customers to kind of like transition that into a learning into action.
Yeah, so I can share some examples like on the so BMO is a large North American bank. We have products and services in retail and personal business banking, commercial banking, capital markets, wealth management. But I can share an example in the retail and business banking um, line, which
Okay.
was to develop an education program for homeowners to highlight the benefits of home equity financing that could help them afford to make retrofits in homes.
Hmm.
So, thinking about credit requirements, capital requirements associated with green buildings. So, how do you analyze the credit risk associated with buildings generally? But then we've also proven out with 20 years worth of data that green buildings, more efficient
Hmm.
buildings, actually have a lower credit risk. So how does that
Oh,
factor
interesting.
into their
Yeah.
finance, their ability to get financing? So we're doing those kinds of things to figure out like where does the data actually show that these are better investments or safer credit risks so that we can
Right.
advance solutions in that way. So it's a little bit more maybe behind the scenes to a
No,
typical bank customer, but it's really
mhm.
important infrastructure.
Totally. You have to, and a lot of people out there might be working at banks themselves, and I think it's really helpful to understand. Like what it sounds like to me is what you're doing is not only it's a little bit like user research. You're identifying like what these folks, your customers or people out there in North America are struggling with, or what's impacting them, offering solutions that not only like help them build a more resilient company or home or business or line of fleet vehicles, but also proving out the case that BMO is able to like it's a better financial decision for BMO to help these customers in this way because you're showing that with your example of the green buildings, for example, it's like a better or less of a credit risk. How did you phrase that?
Well, it's a lower risk, because
Lower
the
risk.
the buildings tend to perform better over their life cycle.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you could put one question into every banker's head or before they approve a loan or offer somebody credit or as they're thinking about servicing their customers, what would that
Yeah.
be?
I think it's not necessarily about making it climate specific. I think at the end of the day, it's what are the challenges your business is facing or you personally is facing, and how can we sort of unpack that and figure out where we can offer solutions? Rising and volatile energy prices is something that your business is struggling with. That's a business problem. There
Yeah.
happens to be a climate friendly solution, but it's also a business solution. And I think that really underscores the moment that we're in.
Mhm.
Climate and sustainability are features of a variety of solutions that actually help businesses operate more efficiently, withstand extreme weather shocks or energy volatility, all of these things. These are business solutions. They happen to be good for addressing our changing climate. They happen to have sustainability benefits. But I think fundamentally, at the end of the day, we want to help our clients understand what the specific business solutions are. And I think that we for maybe a long time have thought about climate and sustainability goals, as we talked about earlier, like a little bit separate from business objectives. And I think what we're seeing now is an integration of those things. And ultimately, I think that's helpful not just for the scale and adoption of solutions, but for the relevance of the conversation and meeting people where they're at. I think sometimes the conversation can feel a little abstract to
Yeah.
people, or in some ways it can be polarizing. Again, to meet people where they're at and to use language that people can identify with, connect with, and really like understand again, what are they struggling with and where can we help sort of regardless of what it might be called.
Right, right. Yeah, it actually makes me very hopeful because now what I'm hearing is that climate isn't like, achieve all of our business goals and hit these other climate and sustainability goals, if we can or if there's time or if there's budget. But really what we're seeing or what you're explaining here and what I've been hearing across the board is that it's really about aligning them because the solutions are in line, especially in something like banking and risk and credit, right? Like the climate is impacting where we live and where we do business, and
Absolutely.
that's super super aligned. I was going to
Yeah.
ask, and it appears to me that BMO is a very climate, just progressive company that's very you're the fact that your position and department exists speaks a lot for the company, in my opinion. But has there been a time there or in your prior roles where you've tried to push a climate initiative forward and maybe it's been difficult with employees or other teams? And I'm curious, like, what is the thing that actually ends up moving them, or does it not? And you would have like taken it a different way.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think regardless of the organization and regardless of the company's, purpose or values or any of those things, you're always going to be met with, or you're generally, should anticipate resistance because humans are humans and we like things the way we like them, and change is hard for some people sometimes. And so maybe I'll start with BMO's climate ambition, which is really to help be our client's lead partner in their pursuit of energy and climate resilience. And so we start from there. Like, what are our clients' objectives and how can we help? How do these solutions align with business objectives? And the more that you can tell that story of how these things are not divorced from one another, I think the more successful you can be. And so, as I said, the Climate Institute tries to do that by amplifying those stories and leaders who are creating solutions and making a positive impact in a way that's pragmatic and beneficial for business. And I think generally what I would say is, in large organizations for sure, maybe in small organizations, people don't disengage from, climate or sustainability discussions because they don't care. I fundamentally think that they maybe disengage or don't engage because it feels abstract to them, or they don't see how it relates to their day-to-day job responsibilities. And so I think what I really try hard to do with the Climate Institute is to make it real, make it accessible. Like I said, meet people where they're at, use language that resonates and is not, off putting or maybe comes with a lot of baggage, and to create tools to help bring climate action to life in a way that is relevant to their day to day and helps them to solve a problem that they have. I think, it's important to do a lot of listening to understand where
Hmm.
people are coming from and what they may be struggling with. And again, at the end of the day, it's our goal to be our client's lead partner. How can we help them based on what their
Hmm.
objectives are?
Yeah, or our coworker or
Exactly.
yeah. I love that. And I feel like that's the job of all of us who care about this topic or this planet, right? Anybody listening, it's like I love how you said make it real. And it's our job to help connect the dots and help them understand how it relates to what their incentives or goals are because I think you're right. Like people have big hearts and they care. It's just a matter of like what's in front of them at the moment and how do we kind of like open the aperture a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also empower people to show them how they can
Yeah.
be engaged in a way that makes sense and feels right based on their skills and expertise.
Do you have a story that comes to mind on that?
Maybe not a story so much as just like in my experience leading climate and sustainability programs. I've been at BMO for 6 years now. And prior to that, I spent 14 years of my career in the apparel and retail sector, leading environmental sustainability for Gap Inc. And over the course of both of those roles, I've had the opportunity to hire people, which is such a cool experience because, I love thinking about here's the work that needs to get done or the objective that we're trying to achieve. Like, what's the best talent to help do that? And I think what is so cool about climate and sustainability work, maybe especially in a corporate environment, is that there's not really a specific path to being that person. It really requires expertise and skills from a wide variety of disciplines. I have worked with lawyers. I have worked with finance folks. I have hired people who are experts at negotiation in the supply chain because they can speak a language that I may not necessarily speak as fluently.
Yeah.
I've hired folks who have product development background because, again, they can speak fluent product development language that doesn't come so naturally to me, but we can talk, we can translate climate and sustainability into that language. And so I always try to hire folks that are smarter than me. And I always try to hire folks that have different skills and expertise because I really think that it takes a diverse group of folks sort of rowing in the same direction to ask the right questions, to think innovatively about where solutions may be in a completely disparate part of the business or solving a completely different problem can be applied in new ways. And I think
Yeah.
that's what's so cool about this work is that you're sort of always engaging with different folks and again trying to listen, trying to understand how are they coming to the situation or the challenge that you're trying to address, um, and where can you collaborate and work together to address it.
And it's not just employees that you're hiring, right? Because you have a fellowship program, I believe, where you're
That's
kind
right.
of like, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So part of how I explained the Climate Institute is structured, part of the work that we do is to engage the broader enterprise. One of the cool ways that we do that beyond, training modules or, fact sheets or things like that, one of the coolest ways that we've been able to do that is establishing the BMO Climate Institute Fellowship Program. And what I love about this program is that it really creates a structured way for employees who may not have climate or sustainability in their day to day job title to temporarily work on climate related projects. So they dedicate 20% of their time over a 6-month period. They dedicate that to the Climate Institute. And then the cool thing is, it has a couple of specific outcomes. Not only do we get access to skills and expertise that we may not have day to day in the Climate Institute. But
Yeah.
those folks then take what they have done back into their day jobs and they become ambassadors. They become folks that can help us spread, awareness and education around the bank's climate ambition back into functions that may not have as direct exposure.
I think that is so cool. Is there because like you said, you're taking people with their deep functional expertise of whatever department they're in. You're kind of giving them this ability to like a boot camp into climate and sustainability, learning about the space, the opportunity, how BMO plays in it, and then they go back to their teams. What have you seen flourish out of that? Any specifics you
Yeah,
can share?
yeah, for sure. So, we really try hard to make sure that we get fellowship representation from across the bank. So we get folks from all of our lines of business, personal and business banking, commercial banking, capital markets, and many of our corporate functions. As I mentioned, finance, legal, communications, marketing. The Green Home Retrofit program that I spoke about earlier, that actually
Uh-huh.
started as a fellowship project. And then it was
Hmm.
taken back to the business line, and it's now, a core part of their home finance portfolio of products and
Oh,
solutions that
that's
they offer
great.
to customers. The policy incentives database that I mentioned, that also started as a fellowship program, which was really like, there's been multiple phases to it over the years. It started out as a
Mhm.
really sort of rudimentary Excel spreadsheet, and then it's grown into a much more sophisticated dashboard that's much more user friendly, and it's been able to be scaled a little bit more broadly. We've also developed internal education modules with folks from our learning and development teams. We've developed a climate hazard database using publicly available hazard information from the government. So then, it can be applied in different ways depending on where you sit in the bank and what your interest might be. But those are some of the examples that,
Yeah.
are real tangible outcomes from the program.
Those are great examples. So what happened? I'd love to dive into the program a little bit to give people, I'm curious about it too. Like, how does it, so you select these folks. I'm sure there's a nice selection process, and then they come in. Is there a list of projects to choose from? Like, how do these ideas get spun up?
Yeah, so we open the application period. The program is always oversubscribed. We get a lot more applications than we have spaces to the capacity to manage. And then we try to approach it in two different ways, sort of tops down and bottom up. So we get a ton of applicants. Obviously, we have a very robust, vetting process. We talk to the candidates themselves. They submit a very detailed application, like essentially telling us not only why they want to be a fellow, but what they bring to the table, and how they could apply that in a way that helps the bank advance our climate ambition.
Love
We
it.
connect with their managers. Obviously, we want folks who are good performers, top performers across the bank. And, we see this as a professional development opportunity as well. Like, this
Yeah.
provides exposure to different parts of the bank for folks who may not normally engage with those different functions. So we see it as a real, like, professional development opportunity. And that's the feedback that we've got. I think far and away, the folks who have participated in the program, the top comment that we get after each cohort is the professional growth that they've experienced as a result of going through the program was probably more than they anticipated, and not necessarily the benefit that they would have anticipated, but has helped them grow their careers beyond participating in that cohort. So that's been really great. But then in terms of projects, the Climate Institute team, we go out to all of our key relationships and stakeholders across the bank and ask for input. We ask sort of what's on your plate, what's on your radar that maybe you don't have the bandwidth day to day to take on, but would be nice and would help you advance your goals. So we go through a process to sort of solicit those types of recommendations. And then we ask the fellows themselves, like, if you are applying to the program and you have a particular project that's of interest to you, or something that you have seen that the bank should be doing or could be doing, or, you want to dive into it more deeply, this sort of gives you the structured way to go do that. It gives you sort of the air cover to have a portion of your time to be dedicated to that project. So it's been really cool to see what people are interested in doing, and and also people who wouldn't necessarily, backgrounds that you wouldn't necessarily be applied in new ways. So I think it just also speaks to the untapped resources in large organizations.
Mm.
Like, I love reading through everyone's applications, like, line by line, because it reminds me that there are so many people. They may be a frontline banker, they may be a home mortgage broker, they may be in the marketing department, but they have a master's degree in sustainable development, or they have, a business degree with an emphasis in sustainable finance, but that's not necessarily their day job. So it just reminds me that there are folks across this huge organization that do care, do have specific skills and expertise, and want to apply it in a way that, helps us advance our purpose. And so the
Mhm.
fellowship provides a way to do that. And it's something that I continue. It's energizing. I love the program. In fact, in a couple of weeks, we'll have a midterm sort of cohort check in. And I'm so eager to see how the projects are going, and just hear directly the experience that people are having doing this work.
Were you part of the team that brought it to life at BMO, or did it predate you?
It predated, we had one cohort of the program that predated me. And every year we learn something new and we tweak the program a little bit to make it better for the next cohort. So I think we are in our fourth cohort
Okay.
at this point. So it's been great.
You mentioned like this is so great for large organizations like BMO. About how big? How many employees are we talking about? Is BMO?
At BMO,
Yeah,
we're about 70,000 globally,
70,000.
with an
Yeah.
emphasis in
Wow.
North America.
How many people get to come into this fellowship every 6 months?
Right now, we have 13 fellows.
Okay. Yeah, I can see how
So
that
it
would be
is really
oversubscribed.
it is oversubscribed. It's a privilege to be selected. It's an honor to be selected, and we want folks who are selected to do this to feel that, to feel that they have this special opportunity, and we want to support them during the cohort itself through the process, but then beyond. And so, actually, something that we're looking into now that I'm excited about is building a more formal ambassadorship program, like creating a
Mm.
more formal network of folks that have gone through the program. To
Mm-hmm.
date, we're still less than 100 people that would have gone through all of these cohorts. But how do we create some ongoing networking and support and engagement amongst those folks?
So like you mentioned, you were at Gap. You've been at a couple financial institutions, and before that at Gap. And I'm curious, what does fashion understand that finance doesn't, and vice versa about sustainability?
Oh, wow. What a great question. Well, I think one of the reasons that I was so interested in moving into finance from the apparel sector was that in apparel, you are very focused on a product. You are very focused on a specific vertical thing. Like, obviously, you're talking about manufacturing efficiency, you're talking about operational efficiency, all of those things that are like transverse and cross cutting. But at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
you're making a product that gets sold to consumers. And you want to
Mm-hmm.
be able to have a compelling story about what it took to make that product and all of the variety of sustainable improvements that you've made to the development of that product. And so it's very product specific. In financial services, it's you're taking a view of the whole economy. Banking serves the whole economy. And so you have to sort of be maybe a jack of all trades in some respects and have to understand the materiality considerations, the sustainability considerations of a variety of businesses. At BMO in our commercial bank, we have a particular expertise around agriculture and commercial real estate, understanding a little bit more deeply, trends related to regenerative agriculture and what are best practices there. The Climate Institute has done a lot of work and talked to a lot of folks in that space. And as I mentioned, the residential building analysis on physical risk resilience, like really trying to go deep on these things and try to figure out what are the cross cutting learnings from all of those things. So it's a totally different sort of orientation. I think fashion is much more direct to consumer. So you're
Yeah.
telling a very accessible message directly to consumers about a product that they're putting on their body, something that is meaningful to them that they're touching every day. Finance is a little bit more abstract, but it absolutely supports the economy writ large and supports people not only in their day to day banking and financial needs, but, their company's long term financial needs. So it's just a different orientation. For me professionally, it's been an incredible learning opportunity to think about sustainability in totally new contexts.
Mm-hmm.
So I got really good about thinking about textile materials and raw material inputs and sort of what does that impact have, either where the cotton is grown or the water that's used to dye it or those types of things. And in finance, it's totally different. You're talking about commercial real estate, building efficiency, and HVAC systems, and what are the cross-cutting solutions, sort of regardless of industry that we can be
Yeah.
advancing. So it's been a really great education, just
Yeah, it
selfishly.
feels like super broad too,
Yeah,
like, yeah, you get to learn about it's kind of touching every industry. I mean, finance touches everything. So, yeah, I
exactly.
hadn't thought about it like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, how do you take care of yourself doing all of this work?
A lot of long walks outside with my dog. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I that's why I do this work is because I have the privilege of, working and living in an area where we benefit from um, clean air and incredible landscapes and, just natural beauty all around us. And so I try to take advantage of that as much as possible.
Yeah, and you're here in the Bay Area too.
I'm here in the Bay Area, a lot of incredible hiking trails and yeah, I try to take advantage of the temperate climate and, just the beautiful landscapes that we have.
Yeah, maybe not surprising, but I would say overwhelming majority of people I ask that question to all say going outside, which I think is pretty telling for the place we're trying to protect.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What keeps you hopeful on hard days?
2 things. One, what keeps me hopeful is that there are so many incredible stories about there about things that are working and about people who are applying their passion, their skills, their education to help advance, really cool solutions. And I have the really fun opportunity to interview some of them for our podcast. That gives me a lot
Yeah.
of hope. And then the other thing is just talking to my team and my colleagues at the bank. And like I said, on maybe particularly hard days, I actually go back and I read those applications also because it really does matter, and people really appreciate working for a company that takes this work seriously and has dedicated resources
Mhm.
related to sustainable finance and climate as well. So I go back and I read people's what they've written about why they're applying for the fellowship program or why this work matters to them personally, and that's always really meaningful.
Yeah, and I mean, I can definitely relate on the podcast front. Interviewing people with inspiring stories is so heartwarming. But also, it's also probably been correlated with how I've shifted my own media consumption, right? Like if all you're following is the negative news stories, like of course that's going to put you in a negative headspace. But if you can find the areas of where solutions are happening and there's like positive progress being made, it gives everybody hope and it kind of starts a perpetual cycle of more wins and more solutions. Um, so I think that's really important to encourage people to do too.
Absolutely. I was just listening to a podcast yesterday and they were talking about the antidote to anxiety is action. And so sort of you can control what you can control and then you sort of have to, let the rest go. So it's about finding joy where you can, finding positivity and optimism where you can, and continuing to push forward.
So, if, on that note, if somebody listening is to do one thing different on Monday because of this conversation, what do you hope it is?
I think the thing that I always come back to, and it's the thing that has driven me in my career in particular, is being curious. I think if people can, not think that this requires a specialized skill set or specialized expertise or a specialized education, but actually that they have the tools in their arsenal to apply them, or take maybe a climate lens to their day-to-day work and be curious, have a healthy dose of curiosity, ask questions. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love it. All right, one more. Finish the sentence. People think that climate action at work requires X, but it actually requires Y.
I think I'd go back to curiosity. People think that climate action at work requires specialized expertise, but it actually requires a healthy dose of curiosity and applying the skills that they already have with a climate lens.
Melissa, this has been a really fun conversation. Really great chatting with you. If people want to get in touch or follow your work, where's a good place to go?
the Climate Institute at BMO. We can put a link maybe in the show notes. And you can check out our Sustainability Leaders podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and then on LinkedIn as well. So maybe we can put those links for folks. But this was really a pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation, Louisa.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. So many useful nuggets from that conversation. But the one I love the most is what Melissa said about why people disengage. They're not disengaging because they don't care about climate. They're disengaging because they don't see how this relates to their day-to-day. It's too abstract. So, if you're facing a roadblock at work, try helping your colleagues connect the dots. Help them see how a change in approach or policy or vendor could help the business, the customer, and the planet. And remember, you can make a difference no matter where you sit in the organization. All you need is curiosity and a little courage. If this conversation was enjoyable to you, please leave a like or subscribe. I would really appreciate it. It helps me know we're on the right track. Thanks for watching.